is responsible for that aspect of labor management. It is also, importantly, responsible for external work programs. And as a ministry, we take very seriously our responsibility to find opportunities for our people to fulfill their dreams and their aspirations. And so we have a program in Canada, and we are working really hard exploring possibilities in the United States. We've just been able to launch an opportunity in the United Kingdom for workers of Barbados who are anxious to grasp these opportunities and move on with their lives and support themselves, support their families, but importantly also to support their country. The Manpower Research Unit I spoke to briefly earlier, as it relates to providing the information that will say to us as a country and say to our education and training institutions, for example, we will need people in this area of technology or that area of technology, the blue economy, the green economy, oil and gas. That unit is the unit that provides the statistical information, we often say that good decisions, good management decisions are based on good information. The Manpower Research and Statistical Unit is that very small unit, but with a pretty large responsibility for providing us with the information that will say to us and to say to our educational institutions, these are the areas that we need to move forward in over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years, as the case may be. This ministry, Madam Chair, is also responsible for the social partnership, the relations among the partners, government, workers and their representatives, businesses and their representatives. The secretariat, the seat of that relationship coordination sits within this ministry as well. And I think much of Barbados knows, but I think it is still important to remind us that the social partnership has been a vital cog in the wheel of rescuing and rebuilding the country at this juncture in our history. And so keeping the partnership together, offering guidance, facilitating the partnership, because partnership is a word, but if partnership is to mean something, then there has to be that focus and that functioning of the different parts. And located in this ministry is that functioning of pulling the partners together and facilitating their involvement in the project of nation building. The Ministry of Labor and Social Partnership Relations is also responsible for social justice. And this is a matter that cannot be overemphasized. Every country, if it is to reach its full potential, must be able to look after everybody in the country. It must be able to facilitate their inclusion. It must be able to give voice to those whose voices are not heard. It is, if the society is not to descend into chaos, it is to be that function that attempts to maintain a certain harmony, a harmony not based on force, but a harmony that is based on an understanding that all of us are a part of the society, and all of us have a role to play in the development of that society. So that as a society develops and as it seeks to develop on its economy, we have to include everybody. And we have to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to play their role, play their part in the building of the society and the building of the economic infrastructure that the societal superstructure is based on. The Social Justice Committee has established early in 2019, It includes and involves and brings together representation from all aspects, all groupings in our society, so that the traditional social partners are included, that is to say government, workers and their representatives, business and their representatives, but civil society is also fully included in the Social Justice Committee, that committee that is set up to monitor, to foster, and to encourage social justice in the country. That committee includes representation from faith-based organizations, representation from the cooperative movement, representation from organizations representing people living with disabilities, from organizations representing the LGBT community, from organizations representing those parent-teachers associations, a wide cross-section, women, men, young people, all are represented in some way on the Social Justice Committee. And that committee is the committee that brings together those organizations, those people, those who represent segments of our population that may be considered vulnerable, as well as those that may not be considered vulnerable, but to ensure that at the table where there is need to input on policy and policy direction, that there is a body of people representing a wide range of interests, a wide range of segments of the population that have the opportunity to have their voices heard. Now, that brings me, finally, as my 10 minutes wraps up, to the third sector. This ministry is also responsible for third sector relations. And we've come to office, Madam Chair, recognizing that even in the best of times, a government cannot provide for every aspect of a country's development. We just do not have all the resources, even in the best of times. And we did not come to government to serve at the best of times. And so we recognize that the third sector is important, that it must be facilitated, not hindered, not hamstrung, but facilitated. And so this ministry has the responsibility of facilitating the development of the third sector, civil society, and just by way of explanation, we talk a lot about the public sector. Most people know what the public sector is, government and government-related agencies, the private sector, businesses, commercial entities, the third sector, civil society, non-government, non-purely commercial. That segment of the population that speaks, for example, to organizations who want, well, faith-based organizations, those who help in many areas in the health care sector, cancer organizations, all those other organizations, civil society organizations, whether they be known as NGOs, CBOs, as in community-based organizations, they all are part of the third sector, charities as well. And our ministry has a responsibility for facilitating their development. And as we speak, we are preparing, well, have prepared a draft cabinet paper for NGO legislation, which has gone out for comment from partner ministries. And that legislation will help to bring some regularity to the sector. It will help to build a sector that is robust, that is seen internationally as one that can be invested in. It will also bring some clarity to the fiscal framework within which those organizations will function, bring that level of certainty so that they know what they can do, how government will partner with them, and how they will be enabled to do the best job that they can, given the zeal and the passion that populates that segment of our country, the third sector. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. We now invite the Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much.
I am sorry once again.
Oh, you want to go first?
I'm sorry, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No, I really will forego my opening statement this morning because my honourable colleague has basically treated us to an explanation as to what his ministry does and did not get into anything strategy or the philosophical underpinnings of the program. So I will forego my opening statement, give way to the member of Christchurch West. But I do have 10 simple questions for my colleague when I get a chance.
You don't want to start now? Okay.
Thank you very much, the opposition, for foregoing and giving me an opportunity to lead off this time. And also, Madam Chair. Minister, 2 questions, and I'll give you the opportunity to get the first one, and then the follow-up will be the second one. You would be well aware that I went on record asking the private sector to give a wage increase to the people of Barbados, that the government had set the record and had given a 5% wage increase to all of its employees. And I thought that the public sector should have done the same. And I don't think we saw, the private sector, sorry, and I don't think that we saw that private sector wage increase that we'd expected. And I thought that was sad. And it was sad because it's clear that cost of living had gone up significantly, 3%, 4% inflation, sometimes over the previous administration. But yet still there was no concomitant increase in people's salaries. My question to you, though, is about the minimum wage aspect, that you did say that you are preparing legislation on the minimum wage. And what I would want to know is exactly what are your ideas and views about minimum wage? Do you have an idea or a number in your head set as to what you're thinking that should be? And how would you, after setting that, how would that wage increase over time based on inflation or cost of living as time goes on? So in other words, will that if you do have that minimum wage idea set, will that then be a set figure, or will it increase by virtue of a formula, or will then you have to come legislatively and increase that minimum wage going forward? And then the second question has to do with farm labor, but I'll come back to that.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The Barbados Labour Party came to office with a recommendation recognizing that the cost of living had been increasing on a continuing basis over the years, recognizing that the rate of increase in pay had not kept track with the increases in the cost of living. And in our manifesto of 2018, we indicated that we would seek to raise the minimum wage to $8. I mentioned before that, and that is, $8 per hour, and to extend it to be a national minimum wage. Now, I say extend it because I'm conscious that there are people who may be listening who may not understand fully what some of the things that we take for granted in our speak. There is a minimum wage set at this point, $6.25 for shop assistants. That was moved from $5 some years ago to $6.25 with an intention to move it to $7.50. But it was done in stages. Now, I spoke earlier to the Manpower Research and Statistical Unit, and they are currently doing research. We are close to the end of February. They are to have, and I expect to have on my desk, or at least on the Permanent Secretary's desk, by Monday morning, because it's supposed to be done by the end of February, a report of their findings into what that minimum wage should be, if it should be $8 right now, if we should phase the approach, because previous studies was setting a minimum wage. After doing the research that is needed whenever these significant decisions are to be made a decision that it would better be phased. And so while we have indicated in our manifesto that we intend to go to $8, we have not said, because we understand that these things require a little bit more research, we have not said how we would get to that $8 and the time frame. That needs to be based on good research. And that research is currently being undertaken. Now, that research will also speak to whether that national wage should be across the board or whether it should be segmented by sector. that was in our discussions in the ministry, that was another issue. We also discussed with the public sector and the private sector. There's a minimum wage board. And the question about whether it should be related to different sectors, different industries, came to the fore. That is part of the research that is being undertaken at the moment. Now, I have not given thought to a mechanism that would increase, like indexing, which is what in economics you would probably refer to. We have not given thought to that as yet, but sufficient that it is raised, we will factor that into our discussion if we should do an indexing of the minimum wage. But what is clear is that there will be a minimum wage set across the board, that is to say beyond shop assistants, but whether it will be the same number for every sector remains to be seen based on the information that comes out of the research that is being done.
Thank you very much, Minister. I look forward to that because I think that has been long in coming for the people of Barbados, and I look forward to give that my full support. My follow-up question has to do with farm labor. And in the past, I knew that we had a very successful farm labor program, especially in the Canadian, in Canada. And I know quite a few people, especially from my constituency actually, who benefited from the farm labor program. But recently, I'm not seeing the numbers in the farm labor program that I used to see before. And I'm wondering, has there been a fall off in the farm labor program? Are you expecting to see an increase? Are you going out there and actually looking for more and more farms, people to get involved in it? Or are people being replaced by other countries? And why I say that is from time to time, I would see, I used to fly quite a lot to Canada, and I would see people from other countries, not necessarily from Barbados, going into the farm labor program. And I would talk to them and ask them, so where are you from? And they would say, oh, I'm from St. Vincent, or I'm from Philippines, or whatever. And I was seeing a lot of people from other countries, but not as many Barbadians. And I was wondering, has there been a fall-off? And if there has been, what are we doing to increase the number back to where we were in the farm labor program, especially in Canada? I heard you say that you're looking at opportunities in the UK and looking at the USA. And I think that's good, but I don't think we're seeing the numbers in Canada. It may be anecdotal, I may not be correct, but I'm asking the question.
Yeah. Thanks again, Ms. Honourable Member. There has been a fall-off, and some of that, or much of that, I attribute to, not all of it, but much of it I attribute to a lack of focus on the program. When we came to office in 2018, I found out that the last time a minister had taken this matter seriously and gone to the location, gone to Canada. And I'm saying this coming out of a tourism background, knowing that you have to go to people and, as we will say, these stakeholders, rub shoulders with them and tell them that you want to be involved. The last time that had been done was 2012. Outside of that, it was a matter of meeting to renew a contract, but not, in my view, given the importance to the matter, putting the drive, the energy, the aggression behind getting, behind getting the business. That said, we have definitely put some more energy into that program, focusing on it some more, because we recognize that we have both a lot to offer potential employers and a lot to gain from potential employers. This is not just a matter of providing jobs for people. Providing jobs is important because people then are able to feed themselves, feed their families, send children to school and to universities and everything else that they want to do that they see as fulfilling their lives. But when a Barbadian is working on a temporary basis outside of Barbados, that Barbadian also becomes a significant source of foreign exchange to this country. And I do not believe that in the immediate past we had seen, or it was understood, the full value of having Barbadians work outside of Barbados, especially on a temporary basis. I said temporary because if you're working on a permanent basis, then there may not be that repatriation of funds as would be the case when persons are working on a temporary basis. Because if you're working for 8 months, then you have to pay bills for the other 4 months, well, for the 8 plus the other 4 that you are in the country. So there is going to be a more significant repatriation of funds into the country. And I'm not sure that that there was a full understanding of the benefit to the country. There are benefits beyond that. People will go to more developed countries. Canada is the focus of your question. And they have tremendous knowledge and expertise in all kinds of farming, greenhouse, and all kinds of stuff. When Barbadians go and work on these farms, they're exposed, in lots of cases, to technologies that we don't have, but that we want to get. And so they can come back and bring that knowledge and put that knowledge to good use as we develop our own agriculture or agro-processing industries. And so recognizing all of that, we made a serious decision that we would put significant amount of energy behind the program. I visited Canada in early November and spent some time moving around all day, every day for about 2 weeks, moving around, going from farm to farm to let farmers know that Barbados is serious about this program. Because I'm of the view that some of the farmers figured we were just treading water. And so Filipinos, Mexicans, people who do not naturally...
Please wrap up your answer.
Oh, sorry. But our cheese was being eaten by others because we were not taking this program seriously. But we are also, like I said, exploring, keeping our focus on Canada, but also exploring the UK, and we expect to have 50 persons going soon to the UK to engage in agricultural work as well.
My final questions, as you spoke, it came to me. The first job program, you did say you were going to come back to it, and I see that you have in your estimates, I think about 750,000 or something for a consultant for first job, 1.5 million for first job. Will that actually get you started and get some people actually in a position to start work for that first job program?
Yes, I remember the 1.5 million in the estimates of expenditure will see the Ministry of Labour and Social Partnership Relations having a pilot of our National First Jobs initiative called Job Start Plus. That pilot, we expect to involve 500 young people. There will be, I understand your zeal and desire to make sure that persons from Christchurch West are included, and I am sure that other honourable members will also have a similar zeal. The intention is to be fair in terms of the persons who are involved in the program. We have to be mindful, though, that as a government, we practice one government. And so there are persons who have been identified in ministries outside of our ministry as being some of the most vulnerable. And so we will be mindful of that in this ministry, like across this government. We do not practice the siloed approach or approaches of the past administration. And so while the program is ours, located in our ministry, we will use as part of the basis of our populating the program those households that have been identified as the most vulnerable, regardless of where those households, regardless of the spread in terms of geographic spread. So that will form one of the bases. But outside of that, we will try to be fair across the board. Now, This pilot will see about 500 young people having the opportunity to do something that as a country we often complain about. We talk about indiscipline. That is as a country. Young people talk about not being given an opportunity to get job experience. We've recognized as a government and as a ministry that what our young people are saying to us is correct. Whenever they look at job advertisements, there is the requirement for at least 12 months of work experience. Nobody gives them that 12 months of work experience, but everybody wants them to have that 12 months of work experience. Many of them are caught in that vicious circle. And then we sometimes wonder why some of our bright prospects have fallen through the cracks, turned to illegal activity. Some people have given up. As a government, we are determined not to give up on our people, but particularly our young people. We're never going to give up on our young people. This program is intended to do a couple of things. One, it is intended to give young people, those in the program, 12 months of work experience, real work experience. It is also intended to create in those young people a discipline that allows them, and I just using an example, if you live in St. Peter, you're going to have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. If you live in Christchurch West, you may be able to get up a little bit later. But somebody has to, all young people have to learn, you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you have to get a cup of tea and 2 biscuits or 2 slices of bread. You have to bathe and brush your teeth, put on your clothes, and get the 6 o'clock bus. Because in St. Peter, we still have, I know as a government we are fixing the transportation challenges, but we may have to get a 6 o'clock bus and get to work by 8 o'clock, put in your 8 hours of work. Dress appropriately for that work. Understand that a lunch hour is what it says. 1 hour for lunch. That you don't leave before your closing time. And you go home. And when you get your stipend, that you learn that you have to put aside a little bit, you have to put some down for bus fare, some for lunch. These are the things that too many of our young people are no longer being exposed to. We're living in an era where those who can, and I'm referring to people like me now, parents, are doing what they call spoiling the children, giving them everything, and there's not that discipline, so that when they go into the work area, they do not have the tools to navigate that workspace. The Job Start Plus, government's First Jobs initiative, is intended to create in young people that discipline in work and that attitude to work that allows them to be productive citizens in this country. And we expect that the private sector will partner fully with us in this program. We have gone out to many of the private sector partners already. We will be intensifying that outreach and requesting that they partner with us on that program.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Madam. Concerned about the power of foreign investment, also the power of local capital, private interests, and the disadvantage which is served to labor and the detriment which is brought upon the Barbadian economy. The ugly, undesirable parts of that reality: low wages, a demand for heavy concessions for long periods of time, and then premium positions in the establishments, especially where foreign investment is concerned, going to non-nationals, foreign nationals. But the most sinister, perhaps, is a seeming determination on the part of several entities to ensure that labor in Barbados does not organize itself. The question is, what is the government's strategy, plan, intention with respect to this reality? That foreign investment can come and make heavy demands for concessions, pay low wages, bring their afford their premium staff positions to non-nationals, and then seek to prevent local labor from being organized. That is a serious problem in Barbados. And you have all day to respond.
Not really. 3 minutes.
As far as I'm concerned.
I will not need all day. But thank you, Ms. Honorable Member. I'm not sure if you still listen to her, but the Honorable Prime Minister would have said just last week, she spoke to the matter of concessions, which is one of the things you mentioned. And I think she very clearly articulated the kind of investment
with your leave, yes, the concession, I know we're going to address that, but I want to know what we are going to do, what the intention of the government is with respect to the efforts which persist to stop labor from organizing itself. That's the one I'm most concerned about at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Honorable Member. As I was saying, the Prime Minister has indicated what government's position is as it relates to investment into this country. And I have to, without any disrespect, Honorable Member, have to start there because there is a philosophy that undergirds action. And that is how, as a party in government, we operate. That philosophy, like I said, was articulated by the Prime Minister. We are not looking for investment at any cost. And some of the things you mentioned, Honorable Member, speak to the any cost side, the wage level, the matter of being able to organize. Now, so we've set on the table that we are not accepting investment at any cost. And as a member of Parliament for St. Peter, I understand that very clearly because I look pretty often at a property in Haywoods, which at this stage reflects government's position. No investment at any cost. Now, the minimum wage research that we are doing and the actions that we will take coming out of that will speak to one aspect of the concern, which is level of wages. That, however, does not cover the entire issue. We have in construction, and this is a matter that has been occupying the attention of the ministry, we have in construction, and it is a matter that I am very concerned about and that we are very concerned about. The hiring of workers in the construction sector and the designation of those workers as subcontractors, when according to normal labor practice and understanding, all the questions that have to be asked and answered relating to control and methods and whose tools, those questions that a practitioner in this business would ask to work out to determine if a person is an employee or somebody who is being, well, we talk about contract for service, contract of service. That differentiation, we are of the view that some of our construction establishments have been taking advantage of people in that regard. Now, one of the pieces of legislation that we're reviewing is that which governs the Labor Department. The Labor Department has only a certain amount of power, authority, leeway to address some of those matters on its own. It has the power to go in to ask for records, but every time we get complaints, we ask persons, are you willing to step forward and bring a case that we can support? And often persons are reluctant to do that. Now, the reason, Honorable Member, why it started with what the Prime Minister said as it relates to investment is because there are often many ways to skin a cat. And in this economy, competition is going to be one of those ways. So we have to work on the legislation angle, but we also are going to use competition to assist in that. So by that, I mean, as there is increasing competition for workers and the labor that workers bring to the table, then basic economic analysis tells you that the supply and demand will cause some things to happen, including persons in order to, but not persons, businesses, organizations, in order to attract good workers or better workers, will have to offer something that somebody else is not offering. So that our drive to bring economic activity and investment, good investment, to the country will help us in that regard. But we are also working, we are a small ministry and we've had to do some prioritizing. We are also going to be working on trade union recognition. That is a manifesto pledge, and that is a pledge from which we will not resile. We will be working on and bringing the matter of trade union recognition. We understand the reason why we have to do trade union recognition and why we have to strengthen the act that governs the Labor Department is because as a government, we recognize that the power relationship in the workplace is not even. And the reason for our existence is to bring some equality or some equity to the table in that regard. We have to do it, well, we do it using moral suasion in many cases, but we also have to do it using legislation. We've said, and I've said often in this Parliament, that you cannot legislate changes of attitudes. But if a country is to be a good country for everybody, then there has to be legislation that those responsible for ensuring that there's good practice can rely on. So we use moral suasion, we will also be using legislation, and we will also be using what some economists may call market forces to help us. So the approach to these matters is not singularly focused, but we are using different aspects of the power of the state to make sure that our workers are well treated. And I want to take this opportunity to appeal again to employers, to treat their workers as people. I have discussions in my ministry quite often over my dislike for the use of the word labor. And I believe that too many of our employers focus on labor and do not focus on people. Those who provide labor are people. They are human beings, just like any employer, to be respected, and it has to be understood that they come to the workplace not as machines with algorithms driving them, but as people who have woken up, some to a sick child, a nagging somebody, to all kinds of issues and illness, and these are people who are expected to perform. Now, machines do not have to take those other things into consideration. Human beings have to. They can't but do it. So
this is coming in quickly, because speaking at my level, I don't know a lot about labor laws and so on, but I get complaints daily almost daily from people working in the offshore companies where overtime pay is a problem. They go to the bathroom for 5 minutes and it's a problem. They dock pay for that. Mm-hmm. That is going to include all of these people as well. They have a day off for the sick child, or they're sick and they have to spend $100 at the doctor, for instance, to get back into work, which is more than they gain in a given day. This will include all of these players?
Yeah, we're looking at all of those,
Great.
all of those matters, and especially in situations. The honourable member spoke to this, especially in situations where the workers have not been organised, and in situations where there are persistent efforts. We recognize that persistent efforts to stop them from organising. We have establishments that have, when workers come across are subject to the matters that you've identified, and they attempt to come together to address them, then sometimes there are reasons are found to get rid of them. Those are the kinds of matters that we will be addressing. Now, we have limited resources, and we started in terms of our legislative agenda with the regulations to the Safety and Health at Work Act. We had a bill, an act, no regulations to speak to how the act was to function on a day-to-day basis. So we have completed the instructions, the drafting instructions, and that has been sent to the Chief Parliamentary Counsel. We had a draft protection against discrimination, and this is one of those areas where workers have been finding difficulty in the workplace, being discriminated against for all kinds of reasons. That bill has now been approved by Cabinet for submission to Parliament, and that will be debated sometime soon. A bill to prevent discrimination against workers for a wide range of reasons. These are the tools that we're using. There are many other pieces of legislation that we have to work toward. Violence and harassment in work, we were instrumental in getting that convention passed, Convention 190 at the International Labour Conference last year. That adds a dimension to our Sexual Harassment Act. It widens it. It offers more protection. We are now in the process of working to have either our existing legislation beefed up to include that, or maybe to introduce new legislation. But we knowing that we have a wide range of legislation to address, we've had to be methodical in working on the ones that we've decided to work on. But we believe the discrimination bill will start to create in the minds of employers that we are dealing with human beings. We are dealing with people who have to be treated as human beings.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I am, and I join my voice with your query and express the concern that legislation comes soon. That which exists in the pipeline, that which exists at the level of the mine, because this government has been quick to bring legislation to the Parliament, in many instances responding to the pressure and influence of international institutions, and for other reasons too. But we need to make haste with respect to legislation that affects the interests of the working class in Barbados. So I hope it comes and comes soon, as intimated by the Honourable Minister. And a second question, I'll probably rest with this one. Unemployment is always a concern, and underemployment is a serious concern in Barbados. And unemployment is triggered sometimes by, in economies like ours, the lack of government spend, the lack of state investment, especially with respect to capital works and stuff like that. We have a situation where it is often said that the private sector must step up to the plate. I really hear the expression I would prefer to hear, come to the crease. I'm more familiar with that type of analogy. But they must come to the crease or step up to the plate and help with the situation in terms of reducing unemployment in the economy and contributing to our forward movement and development. The Barbados context is one in which private capital depends significantly on government spend. And if in the context of the BERT program, the IMF arrangements, government is reducing its expenditure, especially with reference to things like capital works, The private sector, though the banks are loaded with liquidity, is not going there to get credit because the government is not paying out any money, offering any works. We have a compounded situation. I really want to know what the Labor Ministry's position and posture is in this matter, because the Barbados economy must get going, and we cannot rely with a hope and a prayer on the injection of foreign investment. It may come soon, it may not come, it may be delayed, it may be frustrated, whatever. And the economy must get going, and there must be growth, not just stability at the macro level, but growth. So if government is reducing spending, the private sector depends on government spending to get going. Where in the world are we going as an economy? That is my question. And in the context of that, what pressure is the government prepared to put on the banking sector to make some of its available capital available to small interest operators in Barbados, small enterprises? They depend on government to some extent, but they also take their own initiative in several aspects of economic endeavor. But the banks will say, we will lend to anybody, but they're not lending to small players in the field. And the big players are not borrowing because government is not spending to provide a contract. I don't know if you understand all of that.
I understand it to the extent that it will respond in the context of my responsibility as Minister responsible for labor and social partnership relations, and not economic development, investment, finance, small business, or any other similar portfolio. From a Ministry of Labor and Social Partnership Relations perspective, we recognize that people need to work, and a lot of our responsibility is helping to equip people for work, working through what those areas are that the economy will be looking to develop in, and attempting to ensure that we have workers who are skilled in those areas. That is the responsibility of this ministry. As it relates to private capital, availability of funding, from the social partnership perspective, we have been clear through our chair, the Prime Minister of this country. We have been very clear to the private sector, particularly the commercial banking sector, to indicate to them our desire that they come to decrease. I'm not sure what terms might have been used in the social partnership meetings, but that they take seriously their responsibility. While there are commercial entities, commercial banks holding the savings of ordinary people, they also have a responsibility to partner as part of the social partnership, but as good corporate citizens as well, to partner with not just government, but to see themselves as partners with the rest of the country in developing the country. That which would include making capital available to good projects. So that is something that at the level of the social partnership, we have kept encouraging. What we have also done at the level of the social partnership is that in an effort to democratize that financial sector, we have brought to the table at the social partnership the credit union movement, because we recognize that lots of the resources of ordinary people are also in the credit union system. We are really saying to Barbados, we are not seeing the credit unions as the poor cousins of the banks. They all manage significant resources, and they all must have a say in how this country is developed and how our economic infrastructure is built out. So that our role in this ministry is an encouraging role, a facilitating role, assisting the ministries that are responsible more directly for economic activity, development, investment, business development, assisting them in encouraging the holders of finance, the managers of finance, of money, to partner in developing the country, but also as a ministry, ensuring that the people of the country have the requisite skills to take advantage of the economic development, identifying where that development is going to be, and preparing our people to take advantage of the opportunities that we know will arise.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Minister, in your opening, you made comments in relation to a number of very interesting things, and I'd just like to speak about two. One of your comments was in relation to the coming discrimination on employment, I think legislation or bill or act or paper. And if you could expand on that, I would be very grateful. I know it may not necessarily cover my other concern, which is as it relates to the number of people, especially in the construction industry, who tell me now that they would have been working on some construction sites 5 days a week, maybe 4 days a week. They have to work 8 hours, they get a lunch hour, they have to get there by 8 or 7, they have to leave by a certain time, they have regular working hours, but that these employers are insisting that they are now self-employed and consequently must go and pay their own NIS. And if they do not agree to consider themselves self-employed persons, they could lose their jobs. Some are being forced to sign contracts in a modern Barbados. And if I have heard it, I'm pretty sure that if I've heard it, that you must have heard it and your ministry must have heard it. And I'm wondering what we are doing in relation to that, but also a little bit more information on the wider discrimination on employment. And then I have a second question, ma'am.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The bill that speaks to the prevention of discrimination in employment is a bill that is crafted, designed to prevent employers from using what could be considered frivolous reasons for terminating employees, for putting them at some kind of disadvantage, creating some kind of detriment to those employees, to workers. The Prevention of Discrimination bill will say to employers that you cannot not hire me, Honourable Member, because I am over 6 feet tall. Or you cannot not hire somebody because they look a particular way or they have a particular ethnicity, or a whole range of reasons, or because they live with somebody who you don't think they should be living with, or they have some disability, they live with some disability that doesn't look right. A whole range of issues that come up from time to time. The Prevention of Discrimination bill will seek to stop employers from discriminating against their employees for those reasons. We have in our society, not all of them are big issues in a Barbados context now, but as we attract more and more investment, as confidence continues to increase in our country and its economy, more investment will come, and we have to make sure that as investment comes, those who invest recognize that we have certain standards below which we will not fall. We will not allow our people to be discriminated against for the reasons that are outlined in the proposed legislation. Now, we understand that as a social ministry, we have a responsibility really to safeguard the dignity of our people. We have a responsibility to make sure that there is inclusion. so that when an employer seeks to pick on a person because of their color or shade, because we have some of that in Barbados as well. You know, we hear about all kinds of reasons. I know of situations, this is before I came to this responsibility, where in certain jobs, you had to look a certain way to get the jobs. And employers would tell you, but this is a frontline job, and I want a person who is not to this or who is not to that. Those kinds of views have no place in a modern Barbados, in a developing Barbados, in a Barbados that is seeking to build its people. And so we see ourselves as protecting the dignity of our people. We also see ourselves as facilitating the inclusion of everybody. Every Barbadian, every person who lives here has the right to be able to contribute to their own development and to the development of the country, and not to be discriminated against in the achieving of that objective. And so we take that very seriously, and that bill is designed to address the matter of discrimination in any and all of its forms. The matter of the construction sector, I spoke a little bit to this earlier. We have heard both from, as members of parliament, from our constituents, but as a ministry responsible for labor and social partnership relations, from many people who have complained. We've actually also heard from at least one construction company. At least one construction company that indicated that this was a problem. I'm going to mention the company perspective first, because it speaks to good order and the reason why we're taking this very seriously. A construction company complained that because they were trying to do the correct thing, that is to say, people who they knew to be employees, treating them as employees, providing the tools, the uniforms, everything, deducting national insurance, and also both remitting that deduction, but also paying their portion of national insurance. Now, that was causing them to be underbid on jobs by construction companies that were treating to their workers who were doing the same thing as the construction company that complained, but those workers were being forced to see themselves as subcontractors. And so the national insurance obligation of the company did not come into play, and as you said, Honorable Member, they were being asked to pay their own national insurance. So they were saving that 11 or 12% on bids that they were sending to potential investors who wanted construction projects executed. Now that was a detriment to the organization that wanted to do the right thing. That's from a company perspective. So allowing something like this to happen actually discriminates against people who want to do the right thing. But I would say, probably more importantly for us, it puts the worker at a disadvantage. There's a reason why, for employed persons, the deduction for national insurance is done at source. The recognition is that as human beings, once we have the money in our hands or in our pockets or on the bank, it becomes a little bit difficult to take it up and rather than buy food or clothing or pay utilities, to go to national insurance and pay the contribution. So while we may say that it is their responsibility, a government that cares about people also recognizes the challenges, the issues that people will have and will face. And so that lack of deducting at source presents a challenge for many of our workers who, when they get to retirement age, realize that they have not had the 500 contributions necessary for a contributory pension. And then at the age when they really need to have that support structure, the structure is not there because of the misdeeds, I would use that term, of businesses in terms of their treatment of the workers. This matter is receiving the ministry's full attention. It is a matter that we have to work through how it is to be done, because while there are rules, we often have to encourage people. Now, the last time this happened was Life of Barbados agents bring an action against an insurance company over the matter of whether they were self-employed as agents or whether they were employees of the company. The ruling of the court was very clear. The enforcing of that is done on a case-by-case basis. So if it is floated, it means a case has to be brought. This takes me back to the matter of the legislation governing how the Labor Department acts. Because at this point, we rely on people, workers who have been affected, impacted, to bring the action. But a person who complains is also concerned about keeping the job. And that worker is therefore reluctant. That worker is looking to us to help in the circumstances. Now, we approach businesses from time to time, but we have to do it in a moral suasion type of way. So if the business refuses to accept that the person is an employee, that is a matter then that has to be referred to a court of law. And there needs to be somebody to bring the case. So that is the challenge that we're having at the moment in terms of enforcing across the board the matter of, I don't want to say forcing, but causing employers to recognize those who work for them, who are really employees, to recognize them as employees. The legislation has to be addressed, and we are working to address that matter through legislation.
By the same token, if I may add here before you go on, honorable member, that is looking at one side, but then we have, and some of the boards have issues with it, we have employees knowing that they could take their 21 days, for instance, and be paid a full salary, including NAS. How do we deal with matters like that?
I hope my answer, Madam Chair, is not too simple.
I'm good with
heard,
simple.
No, I tell you the reason why I said that. I've heard that complaint frequently through my professional life. And my response is always the same. The only way an employee can continue to abuse a system is if those who supervise and manage the employee allow them to continue to abuse a system. Now, I've had the privilege of having to deal with some of these situations, so I'm going to respond more fully, but from a personal perspective. If an employee has, but I'll tell you what I used to do. So for whatever it is worth, if anybody wants to go the same route, they can. So this is a personal perspective. 6 days uncertified sickness. At day number 4, a notification that you are approaching, sorry, at day number 5, you are approaching your limit. Written notification. At day number 6, you have reached. At day number 7, you have exceeded. Well, you've reached, and if you go over, you're liable to discipline. At day number 7, you have gone over, and this is the first disciplinary step. And you go on, not ad infinitum, because there comes a point in time when there is enough warnings to say you are malingering. You are abusing the system, and so you're going to have to seek employment somewhere else.
But then there are people that know exactly how to work it. I take my 6 days no non-certified leave, and then you find a doctor. I apologize to those who I might offend, but you find a doctor that is willing to give you sick leave from a Friday to a Monday. and then that would be considered certified sick leave. What happens then?
Human resource practitioners have no jurisdiction over physicians and their decisions. Physicians, not like yourself, Madam Chair, but other physicians have made it quite clear to employers and those who engage in this craft and this exercise that their judgments are not to be questioned, and if it is their learned view and their professional view that a person is ill and needs to be away from work, there is really nothing that an employer can do, except insofar as it is a continuing matter that extends to a degree that impacts the person's ability to function in the job, in which case then there is provision to counsel that person or to get to the point where what we call medical boarding, where the person, if you are unable to work, if your illness is such that you are not able to work for a significant period of time, then it means that you can no longer be employed and you will have to be medically boarded. People call it being declared medically unfit. So that is the ultimate option. If a person continues to be ill to the point where they are unable to function, there's also provision for the employer to detect patterns, even when a physician is part of the process. Now, and those patterns then can be investigated. The pattern may show up malingering, but it may also show up that at some time of the year, Sahara dust, there are different environmental factors and other factors that the pattern can
crop over Christmas.
Right, but that's on the malingering side. Different patterns. And some employers have taken to, well, insurance companies have also done it, taken to using detective means to work out if a person is malingering or not. There's been a case where a person, and I like to use cases because case law helps to guide. We try to do this quite often in our sessions at the ministry. We have one coming up next month, where we try to educate our employers. There was a case where a lady was ill, certified ill, and was seen in a hair salon braiding hair. Now, she was terminated, but she won her case only because the person who witnessed her braiding the hair did not stick around long enough to work out if she spent the whole day there. And so I spoke to physicians earlier, but we also have to deal with legal practitioners who will use methods to argue the cases for their clients. Now, my understanding from that case is that if there had been evidence that the lady was there for the entire day braiding hair, the company would have had a case to say, well, she wasn't really ill, based on the job that she was doing at the organization. She wasn't really ill. We have had these kinds of issues. If you see somebody at the sea, now people argue, I've gone to the sea because the doctor told me that will help me to get better. So employers have to be careful in these scenarios, but I cannot think of a situation where a person can abuse a system on a continuing basis without sanction. And so while I call on supervisors and managers to treat people fairly, I also call them to take their responsibility seriously, not to rely on the Ministry of Labor to help them to manage in situations where they should be the first point of management. You don't wait until you have to pull your hair out, then to call the Labor Department and want an officer in the Labor Department to tell you how to fire the person. Usually when an employer calls, that is what they want to find out. We say to employers all the time, on the phone, in our sessions when we invite them to come to be part of training sessions, you have a responsibility to develop your people, to engage with your people, to manage your people, and that managing also includes maintaining discipline in the workplace.
Thanks for your indulgence, Honourable Member. Please continue.
Thank you, Minister, for your thorough response. My other question is on one of the issues you raised. You know, during the election, when we launched in Weymouth, I spoke about paternity leave. I did not know at the time that perhaps I would be the first MP requesting it, but I spoke about paternity leave. And I'm asking now, because you did mention that you're working on paternity leave. I am wondering if it is going to be a statutory obligation, if it's going to be the leave as well as pay, what is going to be the relationship between the employer and the state in relation to this, and just the structure, how far we are in relation to that, and you know what conditions exist for, especially for men in, you know, Caribbean men sometimes may need paternity leave 4 and 5 times in a year. So I just want to know what safeguard, just the overall model and methodology for the approach on paternity leave.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. We're going to try to get it done in time for your use. The structure will, in a lot of cases, mirror what already exists for maternity leave. We've had the... Let me start by saying, as a ministry, we do not believe, and well, our government as a whole does not believe that you defer an action only because it can be abused. We believe that abuse or potential abuse should be managed if the action is going to be an action to benefit others. And so while there is that view about how Caribbean men or Barbadian men may view paternity leave or the frequency with which they may want to have it, we view paternity leave as helping to change that mindset. We view paternity leave philosophically as a provision that says to men and to fathers, you have a role in the raising and rearing and training of your child. You are not just a sperm producer, but you are to be a father to your child, so that what is sometimes felt to be the mindset of men generally, or Barbadian men or Caribbean men, we believe that paternity leave is one of the mechanisms to help us to allow men to recognize their real role, that role being the role of father. Now, the relation, in terms of how the state will function in this matter, it will be our proposal, because we have not yet reached cabinet stage, so I can only speak to the proposal that will come from the Ministry of Labour and Social Partnership Relations. We've already crafted the draft cabinet paper and it has gone out for comment. The paternity leave will be statutory, like maternity leave. It will be, our proposal is that it will be paid leave as well. Our proposal further is that it will be taken around the time of birth, but no later than a few months after birth. So it is at the stage where the child is very young. It will be paid, I mentioned that, and the frequency will mirror what currently obtains for maternity leave, so that the potential for abuse, we believe, will be mitigated. There will still be the obligation, for example, to notify the employer at some point in time before that leave is requested, and then the outlining by the employee, by the father, to the employer of the period of time that the leave is needed for. Now, I will not speak to the length of time because we are awaiting comment. And I don't think I should kind of excite any expectations or put numbers out in the public domain if the number is going to change. But there will be paternity leave. There will be time off, paid time off. So there is the matter of payment, and there's also the matter of the protection of the job. So that after the leave, the father still has a job, as obtains currently for mothers. There is still a job. Under discussion, it would include matters of adoption, including situations where the father may not be necessarily living with the mother. These are all issues that come to the fore when we look at Barbadian society, its evolution, where we are at. But like I said at the beginning, what drives us is an understanding that this, while it is will be a legislative act, really has as its underlying philosophy wanting to change what some perceive to be a mindset that men are just people who go around and drop stuff all over the place and don't take to their responsibilities seriously. We do not believe that that is the case with the majority of men, one, but we also believe that the state, by its legislative action, is saying something to its people. And by paternity leave as legislation, we are also saying to broad society, but also to men, that this is a serious matter that you're engaging in. You have a responsibility. We are going to assist you in that responsibility by providing that you have time off to help to raise the child, to help the mother of the child, and to bond with your child. So that coming out of this legislation, we expect to see socially better adapted young people who have benefited from input from both of their parents, young people who have a better sense of self because they've seen that collaborative input into their rearing, and young people who are better able, therefore, to contribute to the development of society and to reduce the level of what sometimes we refer to as waywardness in our society. That is what this legislation seeks to do, over and above just giving time off to a father.
I hope that would include a little longer for maternity leave, but that's for another day and another discussion. Honourable member, any other questions? Okay, we now invite the honourable member for St. George North. St. James North, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Honourable member and team, I commend you, Minister, for the manner and attitude which you have conducted your ministry, and I mean, that's the only way you know a person of top integrity and Christian background, principled background, and I've been impressed with you as a first-time member of Parliament and Minister, and the contributions on essentially a weekly basis that you make in this Parliament. But I want to give you and your technocrats an opportunity to speak a bit more in detail on two or three areas. The first would be in terms of the Employment Rights Tribunal, and tied in with that, the Labour Department. Employment Rights Tribunal, of course, Program 420, Sub-Program 499 of the estimates, and this is a tribunal, as we know, that would have been established a few years ago. Came off to a very jerky start under the last administration with their failure to appoint the tribunal, the three separate panels, 9 comprising 3 persons, each 9 in all. Failure to give it the equipment and technology. So for about 18 months, it lied in abeyance. And the backlog of cases coming before the tribunal to be adjudicated increased tremendously, such that I believe at the time of the election 21 months ago, there were close to 300 cases in backlog. And obviously that was a tribunal as well that suffered, I think, mass-scale resignations at one time under the last government. 8 to the 9 members, I think 8 to the 9 of them would have resigned. We have now, of course, I know for a fact a case before the Caribbean Court of Justice, which will, help define and interpret that act for the benefit of this jurisdiction. But I am wondering how have we been in terms of speeding up now adjudications, but also part of the whole process of resolution of employment-related disputes and dismissals is clearly the Labor Department. Very important department. I don't know that the people of Barbados recognize how important it is and how many statutory duties the Chief Labor Officer has. And of course, that's under Program 420, Sub-Program 421. And I'm wondering how effective the Chief Labor Officer, Labor Department, has been in resolving now the determination of employment disputes such that they don't have to go before the tribunal. So double-pronged question there in terms of the success rate now in terms of adjudication of matters, speedy adjudication of the Employment Rights Tribunal, but also the efficacy or efficiency of the role of the Labor Department in reconciling matters in terms of mediation, etc., so that they do not reach the tribunal in the first place.
Good morning. I am Claudette Holt-Greenwich, Chief Labor Officer acting. In addressing the matter of the efficacy of the Labor Department in handling cases that may come before en route to the tribunal, at the Labor Department we practice conciliation in that we are more or less down the middle and guide the parties towards an agreement, towards a solution. In the event that the parties do not reach resolution under our chairmanship, that is where the case then goes to the tribunal. The Employment Rights Act, if we are handling a dispute that comes under that piece of legislation, would require that the Chief Labor Officer seeks to address the matter within 42 days, except in a case where there may be extenuating circumstances, and sometimes that does occur. Now, the situation we have is that in that the process that we practice is a conciliatory process, we are not in a position to mediate nor arbitrate. And as a result, we cannot impose a solution on the parties. In addition to that, there's also the tendency of some parties and in some situations to more or less stick to their ground and refuse to vary left or right of what would be the better decision. In a case like that, it is absolutely impossible at some times to avoid having the case referred to the tribunal. So those are some of the factors, two of the main factors that would prevent us from reaching resolution. But generally, though, we can say that employers and employees do come to the table with the correct frame of mind, in our view, with the hope of reaching some reasonable outcome for both parties. The legislation is quite clear in what should happen at the workplace level if there's a difficulty between employer and employee on any matter. What has been happening in some cases is that the employers, we have found that the situation at the workplace tends to fall down where there is the failure to follow process. And seeing that that has been the case, the department has been engaging over the past 3 years, perhaps, in running a series of seminars for employers and their representatives, going through the tenets of the main pieces of legislation with some emphasis on the Employment Rights Act, so that the process is understood and it is clearly applied at the workplace. If we can encourage more employers and have more employers apply the process correctly, then the matter of dispute resolution is one that could be handled effectively at the workplace and where necessary at the level of the department.
If I may add, Chair, what we have done as it now relates to the tribunal, we've taken a slightly different approach. We have started what we call case management, or what is known as case management, at the tribunal level. And we have found that case management has allowed us really to expedite a number of the matters. The work of the tribunal in hearings is public. We say to the parties involved, let's sit down together, let's put all the information on the table, and let us start to talk this through. And you come to a decision whether or not you think you want to pursue the matter based on everything that is before us. And there have been a number of cases that have been brought to that have been sent on to the tribunal that have been withdrawn as a result of that. There have also been a greater number that have been resolved at that stage once people are sitting kind of dispassionately, looking at all the information, receiving some guidance from the tribunal, and the tribunal is a tripartite body. There is a legal person representing the chair, representing that legal impartial perspective, and then there's a workers' representative, and there is a employer's representative. That tribunal then brings that dispassionate approach to the proceedings, and there have been a number of the cases that have been solved at the case management level. But what I want to also say is that to reinforce what the Chief Labor Officer said about process, even at the stage where we've gotten to hearings, I think Barbadians who have been following decisions would realize that many of the decisions have been based on lack of following process. And the reason why I came back in is because it goes back to what I was saying to an earlier question or earlier observation from yourself, Madam Chair, about managers managing and supervisors supervising. There is, from what we have found, a tendency not to manage situations as they happen, but to get to boiling point and then want to explode. So the old-time pressure cooker approach is not used, where the pressure is addressed and dealt with before the whole top of the saucepan flies off. And we're asking people, and those sessions that the chief referred to, we're really appealing to employers to send those people who manage people, who supervise people, to those sessions so they understand process. The Labor Department and the Ministry of Labor has not been set up to say that every worker in Barbados with a complaint is right. Sometimes they are wrong, but there are processes to follow. And the processes, and I think I must say this, the processes are not as onerous as they may appear. In law, it is called due process. So that you accuse a person of something, you must at least tell them what it is that they've done wrong. You must at least give them an opportunity to correct the wrong. If they don't, then you have to take further action. But due process really says, tell me what I've done wrong, give me an opportunity to fix it. And then, if you can, tell me, help me in the process of fixing it as well. You might observe what it is I'm doing wrong and say, but you should have done X or Y. These are things that the Labor Department, the chief and her team, the approach they use in those sessions to encourage employers to do the right thing and follow the process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister and Chief. My second intervention, Madam Chair, would be on the Prevention of Discrimination Bill, which the Minister would have mentioned, but to request some information in terms of it as it relates to persons with disabilities. This is a bill that has been around for almost a decade. I think started off in 2011, I remember, in 2015 or so, going to a couple sessions as it related to persons with disabilities and their employment or lack thereof. And I think we could all accept that Barbados has not been traditionally a friendly country to persons with disabilities in terms of employment, that we have a medical board and persons traditionally who became, let's say, injured in a car accident and therefore became immobile rather than require a workplace, whether it is a government department or private sector, to make adjustments in terms of infrastructure and workplace scenario, so that that person whose brain was in no way affected or capacity otherwise can continue in a job, we would put them before a medical board and send them home. And this bill, of course, which the Minister is gallantly going to pilot, expected to pilot in Parliament in a few weeks' time, would prevent such discrimination. We're in a situation where, at least under the last census, only about 10% of adults with disabilities were employed, and a much lower percentage in terms of government departments. Government has traditionally been the main perpetrator of this discrimination against persons with disabilities in the workforce. And Minister, I am just requesting an expansion on this point in terms of how you see us going forward, in terms of obviously legislative framework, going down therefore to practicality for people with disabilities and giving them hope that once obviously they have the mental capacity and that they will be able to have greater opportunities for employment in this country in spite of a disability, for example, of vision, lack of vision.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The bill does speak to disability as a ground that would constitute discrimination if that is the basis upon which the person either was not hired or fired. Now, a person living with a disability, let me speak to a case where a person acquires a disability while employed. The bill will ask the employer to make reasonable accommodation. A term like reasonable accommodation is used because there are businesses or other employing organizations of varying sizes, varying types generally. And some are able to provide that accommodation better than others. And so the bill will not be a one-size-fits-all kind of bill. It will look at, or if it has to be enforced in a court of law, what will be looked at is what is reasonable in that particular situation. So that a person whose work, as the Honorable Member said, is mental work, if that person acquires a disability that confines them to a wheelchair, for example, and there is a desk provided for that person, then it is expected that, well, let me put it a different way. It is not expected that the employer will say, you can't work anymore if the only disability you have is that you are now confined to a wheelchair. Now, the accommodation that needs to be made is the location such that the person can still get to their desk. Just using that as an example, the law is going to speak to reasonable accommodation, and so it will put the onus on the employer to seek, as far as is reasonably possible, or as far as is reasonable, or as far as is possible, to make the accommodation in the work environment that allows that person who now has a disability to continue to perform the tasks that they're able to perform. So reasonableness, a concept that is very, very familiar to law, will be a part of this legislation. And the intention is to ensure that, as the Honorable Member pointed out, persons who have disabilities are not discriminated against just because they have a disability. If that disability is such that the person is unable to carry out the function that they were hired to do, then the matter of reasonable accommodation still applies, because the question then becomes, can that person be placed in another role within the employing organization? So the reasonable accommodation applies in that situation as well. It does not mandate the organization to do what is impractical for the organization to do, because the legislation still has to be fair to everybody. You cannot say that an organization has to move house, leave the building and go and find another building to make the accommodation. The accommodation has to be reasonable. The adjudication of this will take place at the level of the Employment Rights Tribunal, and on points of law, once the bill is passed in the two houses of Parliament, on points of law, then appeal to the High Court.
Thank you, Minister. Chair. My final intervention under this head relates to one of the strategic goals of the ministry, as outlined at the front of this ministry's estimates, to ensure an adequate supply of trained manpower in occupations in all branches of economic activity in Barbados. And of course, this government is seeking to expand not only the existing areas of our economic activity, but also to go into new branches of economic activity in many areas that we have. And I am wondering what provisions the Ministry of Labour has been putting in place. I'm sure perhaps with the Ministry of Education, in terms of ensuring that we have an adequate supply of people to go into these areas of activity and to take benefit of that, not only for the development of our country, our national development, but for the development of our people and for themselves and their communities.
We do that, thank you, Honorable Member, we do that using our Manpower Research and Statistical Unit, as well as our Human Resource Development Strategy Unit. Now, as you pointed out, the educational and training institutions fall under the ministry of that nomenclature. What we do as the ministry responsible for labor and social partnership relations is to do the research to inform what our development, our worker development, our people development strategy is going to be going forward. That research will share with us, and I mentioned a few examples. I mean, there are some that are with us as we speak. We're talking about technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, those things that would have been part of the strategy of the past, actually, because we are here now. Strategies of the past, development strategies of the past would have spoken to areas in environmental science, in what we call the green economy, renewable energy, etc. We are also already there. The blue economy, marine related, we are already there. And the questions that this ministry is answering now as it relates to what are the jobs of the future have started to throw up matters like oil and gas, started to address matters that speak to what we call the gig economy. Training people not for careers that see them sitting in the same sphere for 30 or 40 years, but where they now want to acquire a range of skills that allows them to move around, related probably, but different skill areas, and work in a different form. It will also speak to the matter of working, the different structures of work. So as it relates to how we position our people for future economic development, our ministry, through research, and that research feeding into the HR development strategy, is how we contribute to making sure that the areas of skill and expertise that the country will need will be available to the country as its economic, as the sectors develop. That also speaks, your question also speaks to beyond the money in terms of estimates. It speaks to the fact that there has to be, to continue to be, and to be a deepening of the collaboration between this ministry and the Ministry of Education, Technical and Vocational Training. Because what our research shows then has to feed in to what the curricula of the educational and training institutions will evolve to be. And so that synergy, we are working on maintaining what we have, but also developing and strengthening the relationship between the two ministries in that regard.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This ministry, we heard from Education, Technical and Vocational Training yesterday. We're hearing from Labor today. And when we hear from the Ministry of Youth and the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, I think it will all become clear how, I'm hoping that it will all become clear how this administration is prioritizing young people and opportunity. I think these discussions starting in this way are very important. I have quite a number of questions that I will try to compound so that I do not contravene the rules of this honorable place. I would like to begin, through you, Chair, by asking the Minister about the 1.5 million that is in the estimates for the Job Start Plus program. It seems to me, as I heard the minister's intervention earlier, that we're talking almost about at least two kinds of cohorts or categories when it comes to who the program might be targeting. One would be young people who are leaving school and who are coming out and are on track to enter the labor market. But then there are also those who may have been out of the labor market, out of formal education for some time. Certainly, when I began my work in political service, what struck me was that under the last administration, there was an entire generation of young people who had never had an opportunity to work. And indeed, I believe that this issue is what Job Start Plus is meant to respond to. So my question in this regard is twofold. One, what are the particular interventions, or what is a particular approach that is meant to address essentially really the two categories, because these would require different approaches to the program, I believe. Different ways of delivering training, perhaps even shorter programs for those who have been out of the formal education system or workplace but for a longer time. So I see that the resources are targeting training and so on, but I am concerned that there may be different approaches required depending on who you're targeting. If I'm a young person who has come out of community college or sixth form or fifth form or some other structured program, the training that I need is different. So that's the first part of my first question. The second part has to do with the role of the private sector. Minister, you have perhaps the fortune of being responsible not only for labor, but for social partnership relations. And it means that with your responsibility for the social partnership, you have a unique opportunity to engage the private sector in terms of how they contribute to and participate in this Job Start Plus program. A lot of what we hear in the context of the social partnership and from the private sector has to do with the availability of adequate labor, a word you don't like, but I'm going to use it in this regard. And so one would think that this Job Start Plus program they are in favor of, and I gather that they are. However, in the context of the convergence of our domestic and international tax rates, given that they now have a much healthier profit margin, and indeed we have seen them reporting very healthy profits, which we want. We want to see these healthy profits in the private sector. But it suggests to me that there is space now, surely, for our private sector partners to really step forward and be specific on the spaces that they will make available for these young people that are being trained as part of the Job Start Plus program. And finally, related to the same program, what about the participation of artisans? What about the participation of people who are not managing large companies? There may be a master craftsman, a master artisan who's working for him or herself, or perhaps only employing one other person, but have so much to offer a young person. There's certainly quite a few in the communities that I have responsibility for. And what do you consider the approach? How will they be engaged? How will they perhaps be supported? Because they can't make the financial and other contributions or financial consideration that a larger private sector company could. So could you tell us a little bit about that? If there's anything you'd like me to remind you of, I'm happy to do it, because I understand that that was a three-level question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The first question, or the first part of the question, I think spoke to the different needs, different approaches to different segments of our target group. Those who sign up, the young people who sign up for Job Start Plus, share with us information so that we have some idea of their background, both community, education, age, and that gives us a platform on which to decide what kind of intervention they may need. We also, at the beginning, once a person comes into the program, we've started that process already. We do a needs assessment. And in that needs assessment, we get a better grasp of that young person's experiences and where the gaps may be. And so we tailor and will be tailoring the interventions to our young people, the interventions that we have with our young people, according to the need that comes up both at the initial application stage and then at the needs assessment stage. I agree with you that there are persons who have done training to a relatively high level, and their issue may just be job experience. And then there are persons who have left school who want a job badly, but they have certain issues with writing, or basic writing or reading, or basic arithmetic. And they have to be treated differently. And the program, the Job Start Plus, is intended, it is structured to address the varying needs of different segments of the population, different demographics, as we identify what those needs areas are, where the gaps are. So the program is flexible in that regard, in that it will be tailored and tailors itself to suit the young person. We are not going to make the mistake of lumping people together and giving them having one approach to everybody. Because one of the reasons why there is some of the deviance that we are seeing is because that is exactly what has happened. There have been young people being lumped together, dealt with in a singular way, and those who fell through the cracks fell through the cracks. That is not our approach, and that is not the approach of this government. The second point spoke to private sector involvement. We have met, and I'm going to be clear because we still have some work to do as a ministry in terms of getting this right. So I just want to be transparent on that. We have approached a number of private sector organizations. Now, we have spoken to this at the level of the social partnership. Outside of the social partnership, we've spoken to some of the business groups, business groupings in the country. There has been buy-in at the level of the social partnership, but we recognize that that is at a macro-ish kind of level. These are persons representing industries who are saying, yes, this is a good idea. Then we have gone to business groupings, and we have also shared with them, because this is now at a slightly less macro perspective, what I said before about us having some work to do. We have started, but we have to intensify our approaches to businesses on a business-by-business basis, where we get specific buy-in from individual organizations. We are keeping before them the fact that with the convergence, their effective tax rates have reduced significantly. And I want to say that the effort to keep that up front in their minds has to be a collective one. And so I am also calling on Barbadians generally to put, because it is people pressure that gets things going in countries. And so while we do it from the ministry's perspective, and while as a government we do it, I'm also calling on ordinary Barbadians to put some pressure on our businesses to step up to the crease and to play their part in this program. This program is only going to be successful if businesses come on board and provide the opportunities. And I agree with the honorable member that we are seeing increases, improvements in bottom line. And as a government, we are not opposed to good, healthy bottom lines because we believe that business people invest to make a profit. All we're asking is that there is a partnership that allows our young people to become the productive citizens that will assist these same businesses as they seek to develop further, that will assist our young people in ensuring that the society generally is not one that is charged with fear and wondering who will rob me, but that is populated by people who have found meaning in life through employment or through self-employment. So we are asking our private sector partners to come on board, but to say to the honorable member and to this chamber that we this year have been intensifying this calendar year. So that will go into the fiscal. But we have started to intensify our efforts in getting businesses to come on board. We have some, but we are intensifying that effort. The artisans. We've recognized that artisans have the particular challenge identified by the honorable member, where in some cases they themselves may not have work for a whole year continuously, because some artisans work a job and when the job is finished they may be off for a bit before another job comes along. We also recognize that their resources are not the same as established businesses. And so government has indicated we've had some focus group meetings where artisans have been involved, they've shared their views. The program itself, Job Start Plus, is a result of an initiative in the ministry, but it has benefited from the input of a wider cross-section of people, including artisans and very small businesses. And we have this program, and the 1.5 million in the estimates for this program includes assistance in paying the stipend. That stipend in Job Start Plus, and I mentioned we are rolling out a pilot program for 500 to 600 young people. We will be paying each of those, as a stipend, each of those young persons, $800 per month. Some of the 1.5, a significant portion of the 1.5 million, almost all of it, will be used to assist artisans and very small businesses in the payment of this stipend to the young persons who are involved in the program. We've recognized that these small business people are excited to be part of the program. Their resources, however, are limited. And while we have a stipend as part of the program, we've recognized that we need to partner with them in providing the stipend for the young persons. So that those young people will be assisting those craftsmen, those tradesmen, those artisans, and will be helping them do some work. So by their work, they are assisting in generating economic activity and returns for the craftsman or for the artisan. But we still recognize that they will, in many cases, they will not be able to bear the costs on their own. And so we are going to assist them. While with the businesses, more established businesses, the expectation is that they will pay the entire stipend for the work that they will get from the person who is on the Job Start Plus program. We will be assisting the artisans in that regard. What we have agreed is that the government, through the program in our ministry, will pay 1/3 of the amount and the artisan will pay 2/3 of the amount. And that is the arrangement that we have come with. We have previously agreed on numbers with the artisans. We have increased the stipend slightly, and so we are not going to pass that increase. The amount that the artisans had agreed to pay would have been $400 per month. And so artisans that cannot go beyond that amount per month will pay the $400 and government will pay the remainder. There are some artisans who are more established and who will be able to handle the 2/3, 1/3. But like I said before, the established businesses, we expect them, especially given all that government has done in relation to the corporation tax regime, we expect them to, and we've already said to them at the macro and in some cases at the firm level, that we expect them to bear the cost as part of their partnership on this program.
Thank you, Minister. My second question relates to your program for 20 sub-program 422, which is the Barbados Employment, Career and Counseling Services, BECS. Now, it seems to me that with reference to revised estimates 1920, there seems to be a reduction in the allocation of about 600,000 relative to the estimates for 2021. And I'm asking about this specifically because of what I would have imagined to be BEC's role in the Barbados Training Initiative. This, together with Job Start Plus, and I gather that this may be led and may not be fully reflected, therefore, in this, may be led by the Prime Minister's office and perhaps not fully reflected, therefore, here in your estimates, and you can help me understand that. But I'm asking about this because this is, as far as I can see it, one of the, if not the most important exercise in which this administration will engage, and the most important journey on which this administration will help usher the people of this country in the next few years. It is the platform for growth for this economy, making sure that people can be a part of the inclusive growth that we are targeting. And so I am a bit concerned if it is that BECS is supposed to have this input in the National Training Initiative, that there is a reduction. If it is that there are other inputs contemplated coming from other places, then please do clarify. But I really want you to have the opportunity, and your officers to have the opportunity, to talk about the role of the ministry in this initiative, and to make sure that members are clear on what that role is and what the relative responsibilities are and what will be delivered under the initiative.
Sorry, thank you very much, Honourable Member. The National Training Initiative, or the Barbados Training Initiative, as you indicated, falls in the Prime Minister's office. We have a role as a ministry in providing information, but as it relates to the counseling and guidance, that is not coming from BECS in this situation. What BECS is going to be involved in is Job Start Plus. The counseling of the young people in Job Start Plus comes from the Barbados Employment and Career Counseling Services. Initially, we were thinking of providing some of the counseling that is going to be needed for the Barbados Training Initiative through BECS. But I think a decision would have been taken to not put that in our budget, so you would see that reduction. That will be in a separate budget. Now, that comes from, a significant amount of that money comes from the training fund, administered by or collected by the National Insurance Department, and those are the funds that will be used for the Barbados Training Initiative. You must pardon me. We just changed the name from National Training Initiative, so I'm still in that frame of mind. But the Barbados Training Initiative, significant portions of those funds will come from the training fund or through the National Insurance Department. The other thing is that the National Training Initiative its interventions are going to be very tailored to segments of society, segments of business, employment that are not the natural place where a Barbados Employment and Career Counseling Service would be set up to address. So that, for example, and we have used this before, the matter of if you're going to train car washers to a particular standard, then the intervention for them is going to need to be very tailored. It is going to have to excite their curiosity, cause them to want to be a part of what is this, how is it helping me? And the normal or the traditional sit down, counsel, talk to doesn't really fit all the areas that the Barbados Training Initiative is going to be addressing. So that the program for training to excellence, working out what excellence looks like in this area, where are the gaps, where are we falling short, what is it going to take to get us to the excellence that we've identified, that standard we've identified. Those, the instruments, the methods that we will have to use, that we have recognized that will be necessary to reach those areas are going to be different. And so rather than BECS, we're going to be developing novel methods of intervention to address those issues and to ensure that at the end of the day, Barbados, there's not just economic recovery, but there's transformation. And transformation not just at the level of the economy, but transformation of our thinking, our approach to our work, our approach to interacting and interfacing with people, that we become an excellent society having gone through this economic recovery program.
Honorable Member for Christchurch South, you asked how many more questions you have. You did 4 already. No, you didn't. You did 4. You did. Honorable Member for Christchurch South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Minister and your team. Good afternoon, rather. Yes. Minister, if any of us had to ask an ambitious young 18-year-old what ministry he or she aspired towards, it is highly unlikely that they would name the portfolio that you hold, except that now you bring to that ministry a language that is morally and politically seductive. And, beg your pardon? Oh, and you said so much in your opening address, although it was only 10 minutes, and you've left us with the view that your ministry is performing important work in terms of mediation between labor and capital in Barbados. That's the impression you've left us with. That's an important plank of the ministry's work. And I took some notes on one of the statements you made, which I found so poignant, significant. You said the power relationship in the workplace is not even. And I found that quite a remarkable statement to make. And it really teaches us a lot as to the relations between labor and capital in Barbados. if you think the question is not fair, you may decline. But having said that, and having regard to what you may consider to be the reach of your ministry, do you consider that unevenness in the power relationship contributes to a wider social disequilibrium in Barbados?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I think it does. Very simple, straight answer. It does, and it manifests itself in situations where members of Parliament, but not just members of Parliament, others, hear complaints from people on a continuing basis on the treatment meted out to them in some workplaces. And you would have heard from my comments that I don't like the broad brush painting exercise. There are some workplaces, the names of which occur more frequently than others. And in some of those workplaces, there's a lot of tension, a lot of unease. And the reason why I answered your question to say yes is because when a person is mistreated, unfaired, as we would say, at work, when they go home, they're not able to mask the fact that they've just left 8 hours with a demon. And that must, because of the nature of human beings, that must have some impact on the other people in the household. It must have some impact on those with whom they interact on a social level, maybe even at church, because from time to time, I know the Honourable Member for St. Michael West would know that, people ask for prayer because of pressures in all kinds of areas. So that I am not able, Honourable Member, to quantify the level. I can't say that some percentage of deviance is a result of, but I do know, and I think most of us know, that bad treatment in a workplace must manifest itself outside of the workplace. And I'm of the view, without any empirical data, that it is having a negative impact. And I also believe, again, the disclaimer is I don't have the empirical data, but I believe it affects the view of some young people as it relates to working for people. And I believe that the desire of a lot of young people to work for themselves is not just a built-in desire to be an entrepreneur, but it comes from a view that working for people is hard work, low pay, bad treatment at work. That view, that I believe is a result of the experiences of some of the people that they have interacted with. And the reason I spoke to the unequal power relation, that is the reason, as a matter of fact, the only reason for government is because there are unequal power relations in a society. If we were all equal, then there is no need for government. But because the strong will kill the weak, then we need to make sure that chaos does not reign and that the vulnerable are looked after. In our case, in our ministry, the vulnerable become those who are the workers, those who are at the lower end of that power relation, and our job is to look out for them and to protect them, and that we do through the suite of legislation that we have, and legislation that we need to amend and strengthen, and in some cases, legislation that we need to bring.
Thank you very much. Another question, ma'am? Thank you. Those of us who've practiced law for some considerable time are now met, Minister, with a relatively new procedure, and quite creative, actually. The protocol, the mediation protocol that is engaged when a dismissed worker sues, either for reinstatement or, wrongful, unfair dismissal. it is new to us who have practiced law for some time. We don't resist it, nor do we reject it. This is where the worker goes to the labor office and with the employer, and there's some attempt at reconciliation of whatever nature, and this is before the matter reaches the court or the tribunal, so to speak. You just spoke of empirical data. Just inform the public, if you may, as to what is the success rate of this protocol, this intervention that is done. You may not have the statistics, but what is the relative success rate of this intervention that is done, this mediation that is done between the worker and the employer, that obviates the need for any further redress in the court or before the Employment Rights Tribunal? Okay. Is it working or is it not working?
It is working. I think the Chief Labor Officer spoke to that slightly earlier. I don't have the empirical data here.
Yes.
So I said that up front. However, anecdotally, many more cases are dealt with and resolved at the level of the Labor Department.
Excellent.
Than the amount that would be referred
to the tribunal.
To the tribunal.
Yes.
Many more are dealt with. A lot of the time, because when people come to the Labor Department, it seems as though there are sometimes pretty basic things that they're not aware of. Mm-hmm. And once made aware, then the issue, in some cases, becomes moot.
Yes.
The issue goes away once they're made aware, but particularly that they're made aware of it from the government's perspective. Mm-hmm. So they understand that this is not from an authoritative source. Mm-hmm. So many more are dealt with at the level of the Labor Department.
Good. That's reassuring. And my final question, ma'am. I heard you make reference earlier to the farm labor program, perhaps a terminology that is now dated and needs to be modified somewhat or modernized somewhat. That program has tended to fix its gaze towards the northern hemisphere. Obviously, it used to be Canada, then it used to be Florida. We saw in last week's media a report that it is now fixing its gaze on England, which is very, very curious in the aftermath of Brexit and so on. One does not wish to be opportunistic with the recent developments in Guyana, but I'm wondering if that could be an area in which we look towards labor exchanges rather than to use the old term farm labor programs, labor exchange initiatives, particularly in Guyana with its big land mass, and of course the recent discoveries of oil and so on. And of course, as a very active member of CARICOM, as a founding member of CARICOM when it was CARIFTA at the time, Guyana has been more than any of these countries more committed to the idea of regionalism. And I'm wondering if that exchange, that labor exchange, may now focus its gaze on that part of South America and perhaps other regions of CARICOM. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'm glad you raised that because it was something that I had intended to speak to that I did not get the opportunity to address. Guyana, I want to speak to Guyana, both Guyana and Suriname.
Yes.
So let me speak to Suriname first. We have shared with some of our, and the term we use is seasonal agricultural workers. Mm-hmm. In terms of the modern term, we don't use farm labor.
Yes.
But we have shared with our seasonal agricultural workers the opportunities that are available in Suriname, where they can move now not to be workers on the farms of others, but to set up for themselves farms in Suriname. We thought that was a good target group because they are already accustomed to spending many months away from home. And so that would not be a difficult transition for them to make. So that is an area that we are actively speaking to persons who can take up the opportunities. On the matter of Guyana, what we have only recently, though, but started to work on is, or I started to discuss, let me put it that way, I don't want to mislead the chamber or the public. We've started only to preliminarily discuss the matter of Guyana and what is going to be its new oil and gas industry.
Yes.
And the fact that they will need plumbers and welders, particularly, plus other skilled areas, but plumbers and welders are persons who we train in the country.
Yes.
And so we are going to be going out to seek out the opportunities in those two areas initially, and maybe others, but those are two areas that we've identified that we can go out to source persons for. You spoke about labor exchange.
Yes.
We expect in Barbados, offshore, to have a similar industry in the not too distant future. And so having persons go out to Guyana now to start work and acquire skills in these areas, these two, like I said, plus others, but plumbing and welding, will no doubt redound to our own benefit. So the short answer to your question is yes, we are also looking south as it relates to Suriname and Guyana. We do see the matter of the skill exchange where we can send people, they can be exposed, and then they can be of significant benefit to the country as we develop our own industries in those particular areas of expertise.
Thank you. I truly admire the work you're doing, Minister.
Thank you.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, ma'am. This Job Start, First Job initiative seems to find much of its premise in an admission and acknowledgement that is a level of disillusionment, frustration, cynicism, especially among our school leavers, young people, with respect to job opportunities. I made reference to that sometime yesterday. One of your colleagues privately called me aside after and chastised me for putting abroad the view that there's a significant level of disillusionment and disappointment among young people, frustration, the lack of employment opportunity after they've studied hard, worked hard, to find that opportunity. How do you respond as a minister, and perhaps how does your ministry respond to that? Is this a response to a level of frustration and disenchantment among young people, lack of opportunity in Barbados for work?
Thank you, Honourable Member. It is both an initiative to help our young people find themselves, find their way, and put them in a position to contribute to their own development and to the development of the country, as well as a response, and I said this earlier, because I've heard it, all of us have, young people who say to us, we want a job. There is a job available, but the person who is doing the hiring wants us to have 12 months of experience. So Job Start Plus is both of those, and there is no harm in addressing an existing issue with their program. Sometimes people speak to reacting. I have no such issues in my head because a lot of life is about reacting, but this is also proactive to assist our people, especially as it relates to our view that everybody must be included and everybody must be given an opportunity. Now, a lot of the disenchantment I'm not sure if I'm using your words accurately, disenchantment or disillusionment A lot of that has come as a result of, I am not sure if it was a deliberate policy of the last government, but a situation where opportunities for further education was reduced, I think, by more than half. You had a situation where the numbers of persons at UE, at BCC, SJPI, people who would have gone on to equip themselves in a way that would have positioned them to better be able to take advantage of opportunities, was almost decimated. And so some of the disillusionment that we are seeing, or that we saw coming into office, was a result of an almost destruction of the further education opportunities and possibilities for young people in this country. The Honorable Prime Minister said, and all of us agreed, and also said previously, that government is about choices. And we believe as a government that young people and their prospects and their opportunities are high, high, high on the agenda. And so one of our earliest interventions in government was to ensure that tertiary education was available to all of the young people of the country that had the ability to move on to take advantage of that tertiary education. We never say it is free because somebody has to pay for it. But we believe that our young people must be given the opportunity, and we further believe that the rest of us will come together and through our taxpayers' dollars give opportunity to those persons who could otherwise become, as you said, disillusioned or disenchanted. So that was but one of the programs. When the Ministry of Youth comes there, we'll talk about their programs. From our ministry, Job Start Plus is another one of those programs intended to address that matter.
Now you are locating the frustration at a level of those who felt that they were being denied the opportunity of further education. That's why I heard you say it. I thought my sense is what I hear from people is that this level of frustration actually exists with those who come out of school and want to work, not necessarily study further, or those who have gone through the tertiary level and can't find opportunity after they've had the opportunity of studying. That is where the frustration is. That is my sense from my interaction with people out there.
I spoke to two things. I think you heard the second one, which would be those who were not able to further their education. But I had earlier spoken to those who expressed frustration to me directly about wanting to go into a job and being told you need to have work experience. And that is the reason why Job Start Plus has as one of its objectives the provision of that 12 months of work experience. People who want to work, not all of them, as a matter of fact, maybe not the majority of them, having done tertiary education, but want to work, and the hindrance that they've come up against is that lack of experience. Now, there are other factors at play that other ministries and other programs and other interventions address. Job Start Plus is intended to address the matter of persons not having the experience and us providing that platform, that opportunity that allows them to get the experience. And also, in addition to that, the matter of providing that discipline that comes along with the experience so that those persons who want to work but don't have the experience can now have the experience and position themselves better for a job.
Sorry, if I may come in here, does that include students or graduates of all areas? Because right now we have not only the people with degrees coming out, psychology, even medicine, dentistry, and cannot find jobs. How does that come in with your Job Start? Or is it
The
only for
opportunities
the
in Job
skilled?
Start Plus will depend on the spaces that are given to us by various employers. And so as we build out, I think we have a number of spaces already committed, but as we build out to get to the 500 or 600, then those areas will be made public, and persons who are on the program will make decisions as to which area they may want to go. So we are not targeting any particular area of employment or any particular demographic in terms of young person. We are, the only situation I spoke to earlier was that those most vulnerable, any young people in those most vulnerable households must be addressed. Outside of that, those who apply, but no specific area. If there is a person who has, you mentioned doctors, if there's a person who has MBBS and there's an opportunity in a supermarket and that person can't find work and wants to work and they're a possible candidate for it, if that is the person's desire. We are not cutting anybody out.
It hardly ever is somebody with that degree, the person's desire to work in a supermarket. It hardly ever is. That's usually after desperation. But I guess that will come in where you will be fit to purpose, for instance, not taking on a role of overextending the services. In other words, more doctors or more social workers than the country actually requires, which I think you alluded to earlier with respect to coordination with the Ministry of Education. Yeah.
I use, Madam Chair, the extreme just to prove the point, just to say what I really wanted to say.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I'm sure the minister will make sure he's quite clear with respect to the extreme illustration that he just used. Now, Minister, to what extent can you speak to the success or otherwise of government's digitization program? We were told that, to what extent can your ministry speak to the matter of government's digitization program? We were told that this was part and parcel of the process of reabsorbing some of the retrenched workers back into service. Really, I would like to hear if you are in a position as the ministry responsible for labor, industrial relations, etc., social partnership issues. How many people were severed or laid off in the public service? To what extent have those numbers been reabsorbed into service?
I'm not able to give you a definitive on a number on the reabsorbed, so I'm not even going to guess. Those persons who were separated from employment number somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100. The last count that I would have had, but when the ministry responsible for science, innovation, and smart technology is in the well, I'm sure they'll be very willing to speak to the matter of the numbers who have been re-engaged in that program. And just for clarity, it is a modernization program as opposed to a digitization program. The words mean something. It is not just a play on words. The words actually mean something.
Honorable Member for St. James South.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Honorable Minister, Honorable MP for St. Peter, and congratulations on your regathering program that is ongoing and coming shortly to a close. I was very, very pleased to hear some of the initiatives that your ministry is undertaking in relation to labor And in reading the information about some of your plans, there were some questions that I wanted to raise. One question was actually raised by another member this morning, but I'll just put this on the table just to alert you in case you've not been made aware. In my constituency, I've had a number of young people employed by firms investing in Barbados. And it seems as though one of the techniques being used to avoid severance, to avoid long-term contracts, is to give people these 6-month contracts, etc., and just keep renewing them, which is to get around the labor requirements that we have here in Barbados. I know when you were speaking, you talked about the importance of bringing legislation to help correct behaviors, etc., and so on. One of my challenges with that is this, that we are often doing legislation to correct behavior in 10% of the population that we're dealing with, and placing a burden on the entire 100% who may not be violating, and who may, as a result of that legislation, now find themselves under enormous financial pressure or pressure in their systems that they can't carry. If, for example, I'm very conscious of this because small businesses often have to cope with legislation that we put in place to govern various things. But sometimes those companies don't have the resources, or they don't have the personnel to be able to manage compliance that is required. So I was wondering, because I know it's not easy, because we're now coming out of a bad financial, economic situation, and too many demands on companies at this time could actually dampen growth if the demands carry financial liability. So I'm wondering if part of what needs to be done, and I don't know what capacity you have in your ministry, where perhaps monitoring and inspections and then having discussions with a violating company to change its ways, if that could be used to better manage the people who are violating, as opposed to tighter and tighter legislation, or if legislation can make exemptions or have different levels for different types of players. Because my main concern is that we don't dampen growth by too heavy a demand on your small business.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I think you can rest assured that the legislation coming out of this ministry is never going to be onerous. One of the benefits we have is that in the ministry responsible for labor, there is a slavish attachment, and I use slavish almost in a positive sense, attachment to consultation. We hold on to it tightly. And the legislation coming out of the Ministry of Labour and Social Partnership Relations benefits from significant input from workers' organizations as well as employing organizations. And as a result of that, we become aware of issues that could arise. I'll give an example. The Holiday with Pay Act was changed by the last administration, and it has imposed, it seems, a significant burden on some organizations, some employing organizations, a burden that was not there before. This administration and this ministry is now in the process of reviewing those aspects of the legislation, about to go back to the partners to discuss any amendments, any possible amendments that may arise. I would also want to we state that in the legislation, and we were talking about the prevention of discrimination, the term reasonable accommodation. I said we don't paint with one brush, there's no one size fits all. And that is the reason for a term like reasonable accommodation. Because reasonable for a small company employing 2 or 3 people is likely going to look different to reasonable for a multinational with an operation here that is employing 150 people. That reasonableness concept allows the employer, allows the court to understand that there's a difference between this small business and this larger business. The principle of action remains the same, but what is expected of the organization could be very, very different, because reasonable means different things to different people. Now, while the Employment Rights Act was being developed and discussed, there was a lot of talk about how onerous it was going to make the management of people, especially for smaller businesses. I took the view then, and I still have the view now, that if you're going to employ somebody, it cannot be too hard, too difficult for you to put down on a sheet of paper, even if it is in your own handwriting, that the person is going to start on the first day of March of 2020, and that their pay is going to be $70 a day, and that they're going to be employed, and you don't have to use the same words, to do X or Y. It can't be too hard for a person to put that down on a sheet of paper. It also can't be too difficult for that person who is employing another person to give that person a piece of paper, either typed or in handwriting, that says $70, I had to take out $8.75 for national insurance, and what you are left with is $61.25. If that is too difficult, then you probably should not have been employing somebody. So that the matter of managing workers is not to say that you must buy a computer or that you must hire a human resource professional. It is just to say that you must document certain things, that if you have an issue with the person you've employed, you must tell them what it is. You must say to them, this is the issue, and I want to sit down and talk to you about this. Let's talk about it tomorrow. And you talk about it tomorrow. And if there is I expect your behavior to change, I expect your performance to change. These are things that people may not have been accustomed to, but may see as onerous. And that is why in this ministry, we see our responsibility not just as enforcing these basic tenets of people management, but also to helping employers. So the Chief Labor Officer spoke earlier to the sessions that we have. We advertise them. We encourage people to come, spend half of a day listening, asking questions, and realizing that managing people is not as difficult or as onerous as you may otherwise believe.
I heard you saying that, and it sounds really easy when you share it. And I know from a previous life that technically that's what it is, and that is what we try to help people to do. The challenge is the doubt that employers have. They're terrified they're going to do it wrong. Why? Because they will take a case to the labor office, a good case, the person did such and such wrong, you can prove it's wrong, and this is what should happen because they've done it wrong. But they lose it on the process. Right. So they become tense and terrified, even in giving the statement of particulars. They think they're doing it wrong and they have to get a professional help them.
And that's the reason why I did not use the word statement of particulars.
Yes.
Because there are, and I agree with you that sometimes in legislation, I'm not an attorney, I don't want to bash attorneys, but sometimes terms are used that scare people. I don't think they're used with the intention of scaring people, but the sound of the terms sometimes scare people into thinking that something is more complex and complicated than it really is. And so I almost never use the term statement of particulars. Sometimes I don't even use the word payslip, even though payslip is a basic thing. I want to use this opportunity to say to employers, especially small employers, just like a worker has a recourse to go into a union, an employer has a recourse in coming to the Labor Department as well. The Labor Department is not set up only to deal with issues that workers have. The Labor Department is also set up to deal with issues that employers have, because it is set up to deal with issues in the workplace. Not necessarily issues that workers have, but issues that will arise or could arise in the workplace. So that I am encouraging employers, if you are not sure, call the Labor Department.
And I want to thank you for that. From my previous life, whenever I've been able to reach a labor officer, excellent advice, sound, patient, and I really want to compliment them on that. The main problem, and I take the opportunity here to say it on behalf of small businesses and on behalf of management and HR consultants who seek to reach the labor office, the constant complaint is that the telephone is not answered. And very often people have to leave their workplace or leave where they are and go to the office to try to get information. That is why I was particularly pleased to see that you have the Barbados Labor Management of Information Systems, is it?
Yeah, that is a portal that we are working to
Working
develop through
on?
Manpower. Yeah.
I cannot express how critical that is going to be to the delivery of service, because sometimes people just want to ask a question. And having a portal that will immediately give an employer who is uncertain, it's just one question, or just clarify, well, what do you mean by X? So I feel that if you can put that in place as quickly as possible, it would do a lot. I also have concerns because in your brief, you shared what has been done by the Industrial Relations section. They have handled between April 2019 and September 2019, 16,256 calls. And that is nothing to the ones that got fed up and didn't bother to call. So one of the questions I have, and when I look at the other things about inspections and so on, it may be that you have a shortage, that the Ministry of Labor is short of labor. I know that as a government, we are not in the position to give everybody what they need. So I know people are working all out to be able to deal with this. But I'm thinking that the use of technology may be a very useful thing to help you better manage this load, because it's a big load. And I want to congratulate the team again on the good work, and if we could get that in place, I think it would make a tremendous difference and build the confidence of small employers in engaging their labor issues.
Thank you very much for that, Honourable Member. That is an issue that really needs to be clearly on the table. Now, other members raise issues, workplace issues. The Labor Department's mandate also includes a labor inspector function. When there are not enough people around, then there's an issue. And I've become more understanding, so this is no confession time, honorable member. I've become more understanding having become minister because I too had challenges in terms of calling in to the Labor Department. I came in to serve in this office and immediately to the then chief and then deputy chief, who sits on my left acting as chief. Nobody answers the phone. But I was also saying that there are issues out there in the workplaces and people need to be out there. And they're in their normal, sober tone said to me, but if you can't be out there and in here at the same time. And I have had to come to the realization that we have to work through, and it's not going to be an overnight matter, but we have to work through how we get everything done that we're supposed to do. Because we cannot just throw up our hands to say, well, we don't have enough resources, so this government is not a government of things falling through cracks. And so we have spent a lot of time in the last, I would say November, December, January, last 3 months, talking a lot and focusing on how are we going to use media, both traditional and social media, and websites, internet generally, to get the information out to the public. I think the team that I have the privilege to lead that works hard, a small team, a very small team, maybe one of the smallest across all government, but expected to do a lot. But this team works hard, and we've realized that we have now to focus our attention. So while we discuss different legislation, as the Honorable Member for St. Michael West talked about, and pushing everything forward, there's so many balls to juggle. We have to focus on how we get the information out using social media. It means refocusing our minds from printing paper only, or from having the sessions that the Chief Labor Officer spoke to earlier only. How do we package the information? Yes, I'm going to wrap up shortly. How do we package that information so that ordinary people who we may think are not sophisticated, who want the language in bite-sized portions in a form that they can easily absorb and know how to act as employers, or how to act as workers, or what their rights are as workers. That is going to be one of the areas of focus in the new fiscal year. We've started to talk about it, but in the new fiscal year, we're going to be spending some time on a different mode of sharing information. Hopefully that will reduce the thousands of calls that we get. We are also aware that there are persons, and I'm going to have a little discussion with the Ministry of Finance, because at this point we're not sure in terms of an adjustment that was made to the budget. We recognize that there are people we need to reach who do not have, who we cannot call from a landline. So again, this speaks to people small people who don't have resources, who want issues addressed. And we have taken a decision that we cannot pick up a line or telephone off the desk and call their cell phone, because they may have been laid off, be out of a job, but they're asking questions. But we need to reach them, because our mandate is to reach people and to address their needs and their concerns, so that we have engaged with, having gone through the correct procurement processes, we're going to be using cell phones from the ministry to call people on their cell phones. That is an example of how this government approaches its interaction with people. We have to reach them, and we're going to reach them in a way that will allow us, using a method that will allow us to reach them. So we're going to be doing that as well, but that also makes us more mobile, so that in terms of receiving calls and being able to accept calls, and you can appreciate with 16,000 calls, if there are 4 people in the office, it is possible, very possible, that all of those persons are going to be on calls. And in this activity, honorable member, given your past life, when somebody calls, especially if they're angry, you can't get them off the phone in 2 or 3 minutes. You have to work through what they may have done right, what they may have done wrong. is going to take a while. Each of those, it becomes, and I think the Honorable Chair may know, yes, I understand that, but it is sometimes, it becomes almost like a doctor's visit. You can't just churn them back out. You have to talk them through. They come that they're right about something, and you have to explain. But anyway, I'm happy to know that you recognize the limitations that we have, but I'm also equally happy to share that we are not going to allow the financial limitations to limit our delivery of service to the people of the country. We're going to find other modes, and social media, like I said, is one of those modes. Using cell phones is going to be one of those modes. We're going to do all in our power to make sure that the people of the country are served well by this ministry that is using $7 million of the taxpayers' money.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg to sit again.
Second. Question is that I do now report to Honorable Speaker. Progress. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that this sitting be suspended until 2:30 p.m.
The question is that this Honorable Chairman be suspended until 2:30 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This Honorable Chamber stands suspended until 2:30 p.m.